You know, when tax season rolls around, there's always this one big question that seems to pop up. Are we all really playing by the same rules? Today, we're going to dive into a source that lays out what it calls the elite tax playbook. This is a set of completely legal strategies that it says are used to just dramatically slash tax bills. So let's pull back the curtain and see how this whole playbook supposedly works. All right, so let's just get right to the heart of it with this question. I mean, for most of us, right, taxes are just something that automatically comes out of a paycheck. Simple. But is that really the whole picture? The source we're looking at today suggests that for a certain group, the tax code isn't a set of rules so much as it is a strategic game to be played. And this slide really nails the core idea of our source material. Over on the left, you've got the approach most people are familiar with, right? The passive one. Taxes get withheld and that's that. But look at the right. That's a totally different ballgame, an active strategic process of minimization. It's a plan where the entire goal is to legally shrink your taxable income. The source argues these aren't just, different methods. They're two completely different ways of thinking about taxes. Okay, so before we even get into the how of this playbook, the source says we have to understand the why. Because apparently, behind all these strategies, it's not just about the numbers. There's a whole philosophy, really, about what the government's role should even be. And this is the phrase this source uses, and it's a memorable one. Starving the beast. It's powerful, right? It immediately frames this whole tax minimization thing as not just a smart financial move, but as something more. Almost like an ideological mission. But what does it actually mean? Well, the thinking goes like this. If you cut the government's revenue by paying less in taxes, you force it to spend less. You're literally starving it of funds. So from this point of view, paying less in taxes isn't just about keeping more of your own money. It's seen as a way to actively try and shrink the size and power of the government itself. All right, so with that philosophical backdrop in place, let's get to the good stuff, the mechanics. How is this game actually played? The source lays out a playbook with a few core strategies that it calls absolutely fundamental. Here they are, the 3 core plays we're going to break down. First up, you set up the right legal structure, like an LLC. Second, you pick a very specific tax status, the S-Corp. And third, you become a master of strategic write-offs. Let's dig into how these pieces all fit together, starting with that really crucial S-Corp election. Okay, this is where the strategy really starts to click. See, if you're a sole proprietor, pretty much all your profit gets hit with self-employment taxes. That's for Social Security and Medicare. But our source points out, with an S-Corp, you can split your income into 2 buckets. You pay yourself a reasonable salary, and yeah, that gets taxed like normal. But, and this is the key part, any profit on top of that can be taken as a distribution, which is not subject to those self-employment taxes. You can probably imagine how that one little distinction can add up to some huge savings. All right, the next play in the book is all about mastering write-offs. This is about legally labeling certain things you buy as business expenses, which then lowers your taxable income. The framework points to some common ones you might have heard of. A portion of your car expenses, maybe a home office, or travel that's for business. Every single legitimate deduction you find shrinks the amount of income you actually pay tax on, pushing that final bill lower and lower. So, you've got the corporate structure, the special tax status, and the strategic deductions all working together. But what's the point of all these moves? Where does all of this lead? What's the end game here? This zero. Now, the title of the source material makes this really provocative claim about paying 0 taxes. And look, while that's obviously an extreme result, it points to the real ambition of this playbook. To use every single legal tool, every loophole, every strategy you can find to drive that final tax number down as close to 0 as humanly possible. And that brings us to the big final question, right? Is this whole playbook just a manual for smart financial planning, using the rules exactly as they were written? Or does the fact that it even exists point to a major flaw in the system itself, one that maybe creates 2 different playing fields? The source we looked at gives one take, but it's a really complex debate, and there are definitely no easy answers. Thanks for digging into all this with me today.